Use this diagram to describe a habitat.
The flower provides food for the rabbit provides food for the fox dies, the mushroom.
I love everything you're saying, except that has nothing to do with a habitat, but that would have everything to do with the last question that you had to answer. Use the diagram to describe matter. The fox eat, and again, you should mention compounds of matter, but if you're just use this diagram to describe habitat, the first thing you're going to do in your mind is, what is the definition of habitat? Which is what? Where an organism lives. Now use the diagram to describe a habitat.
The rabbit and fox take shelter in a grassy area by a lake and trees.
I accept. Try to choose one organism though, because it's very rare that you can describe, because the fox definitely lives in the grassy area. The bunny probably burrows in that area, right, to hide, which we don't see a burrow there, so we can't say that. But you could say bunnies genuinely dig holes. I don't know. Yes?
Can you say that the fox lives in that habitat because there's a substantial food
You can, but you don't have to.
Okay.
Because all it is habitat. But yes, now, if you're going to describe the niche, now we can get into why he lives there, what time he hunts. Yes?
If the diagram is not specific, should we not assume? Do not
No.
assume that the bunny burrows?
If you have already learned that the bunny burrows, which is going to happen in the next unit, then there's no more assumptions. That's a fact. No.
So we don't know that.
Correct. And I would say that. Like saying that the bunny lives in a burrow and there's no burrow, you're technically not using the diagram.
So arguably that could be a burrowless or a burrowing bunny.
Sure.
So would you?
Here's what I would have chosen. The tree lives on the soil, on that grass. I mean, there's a living thing and there's his home, because trees are the easiest thing. Grass lives, true? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Because there's nothing else. All right. How about if I said, here's a tough one, and the one that I told you is going to keep reoccurring. Describe any ecological relationship in this, using this diagram, describe an ecological relationship. I'm going to pause while you think about it.
I was going to say the grass, since it's like autotroph, or this plant uses the solar, and then the bunny eats it.
Okay, uses the solar energy, finish it, to make its own food, which can then be a food source for the bunny, who's dependent on the plant for food. Love it. Okay? What else?
The fox drinks water from the lake.
I accept. That's the fox relies on water from its environment to survive. Yes. Okay. Name me some abiotic factors in this diagram. The wind. What else?
Please pardon the interruption.
What? The what?
The boys
Sun.
and girls
What else?
ball teams may be excused at this time. Boys
All my
and girls
abiotics
ball-
are orange and my biotic is green. What's my biotic factor here? Water is abiotic, people. What's my biotic factor? Fox. Good. Any living thing. Yes? I'll just expose them. Food, ideal temperature or climate. These are all necessary abiotic factors for life. I mean, I'm sure there's many more, but here. Relations for the next, and then relationships, obviously, between those organisms. Kind of breaking down, again, a lot of heavy vocab. What's the definition of species? That's review.
An organism that can reproduce.
Good. Perfect. An organism that can reproduce fertile offspring, right? How do we know the history of species? Or what's one of the best guides that scientists use as a historical fossils? Good job. And then keep in mind, there's a lot of species, obviously, on Earth, ranging from 4 million to 100 million, all playing a role or importance or specific characteristics. For example, you can either be a generalist or a specialist, and we want to go over that. But before that, If you have diversity of species, what does that mean by definition?
Variety.
Good. That's it. You want to say there's a variety and abundance of species. Now, earlier today, I got the answer. That means your biodiversity. Yes, but we're not going to ever use that word. We're always going to describe it, okay? Keep that in mind. Same thing with pollution. You don't use the word, you describe it. All right, I am going to point. We are generalists. Who do you think is a specialist? No. On this, in this little visual you got going on here. The koala. I'll give you that. Okay, now we're going to talk about why and what. So, one of these groups has broad niches, one of them has narrow niches. What do you think generalists have? What does that mean to have a broad niche? You're adaptable. I love that. You have a high tolerance for environmental change. You can live anywhere and your food source is a variety, right? We are very adaptable. Who else is adaptable in this picture? The cockroaches and the raccoons, which I've already expressed my passion for, or lack of. Yes. And now specialists would be the opposite. They have narrow niches. They fill in the blanks. Specific, actually, sometimes only one, but specific is a good word. One or few food sources, right? And a low tolerance for environmental change. Which means specialists, if there's any disturbance within their environment and there's a lack of genetic diversity, their ability to survive is extremely limited, okay? So not only does diversity take a role, their niche plays a role in their ability to survive because it's so narrow. There's other types of species that play other roles in the environment or important roles, this one being one. And a keystone species has a large impact on the entire ecosystem. Who's seen that word keystone? And what word generally follows it? Keystone what? You've seen it in bio. What word follows the word keystone? It's usually a what? What kind? Predator. You never heard of that? Keystone predator? Write that down. Predators are keystone species. I mean, there's a lot of others, but they play an important role in keeping the balance of the ecosystem. You take a predator away from an ecosystem, what's going to happen? The population of the prey grows, and whatever that prey feeds on might struggle, right? It's just an endless reaction. Foundation species. What do you think of when you see the word foundation? The base. What else? No. But that's actually, you could say that. But I mean, no, because this is a foundation species right here. What do they do? Yes, they build habitats. Good. And then my indicators, what do they do? Like birds.
Oh, they like weather patterns.
Good.
Like that.
What do they do about weather patterns?
They just like indicate like if
There.
it's gonna come or
They provide some kind of warning or some kind of, what would be another word for indicator? Let's put that in a sentence.
Birds fly away when there's a hurricane.
Okay, yep. And when these poor little guys die because there's a change in pH in the water levels, it's an indication that the pH is not good.
I was told like birds like we go on the power.
We got to define native and non-native species in every way possible. What does it mean to be a native species? Indigenous is a good word. You what? You originate from there. This is where you're supposed to live in this specific area, and you're supposed to be able to thrive because you're part of that ecosystem, right? But you've got non-native species, which means what? They don't what? They don't belong. So give me other words. Invasive is a good one.
Like those dang iguanas. I hate them.
What else is another word for non-native? Alien. Foreign. You could write foreign.
Yes.
What about another word You know, a lot of times people bring these really pretty tropical plants and animals, right? And we call them exotics. Now, what do we know? Non-natives don't belong. But when we bring them, what happens? They're going to definitely disrupt the ecosystem, the whole ecosystem, primarily starting with the food chain. What's the biggest advantage to a non-native species? I'm moving to the center of the room.
Last question.
Biggest advantage of a non-native species? Because you said it disrupts the ecosystem.
No predators?
No predators. They don't belong there. Nobody's going to say, hey, I'm going to eat you, because they have no idea even who you are, and that's not part of their food source. So their population thrives where it's not supposed to. And then because of that thrive, what's another advantage to a non-native species?
They have food. So with food,
Well, you're kind of there.
They reproduce quickly.
They're going to reproduce, right? They're also going to choose a food source because they struggle to survive. Other species have their food source, so they don't really look at that. So I'm a non-native species. I'm choosing a food source, and I chose the food source in a diagram of a specialist. What's going to happen to that specialist?
they're gonna suffer.
They're going to suffer because their food source is being taken from this, species that doesn't belong there. The whole ecosystem is disrupted. So good. All right, I'm done. What's the definition of population?
Group of species
Where?
In a
in
box.
an environment.
In a specific habitat at a specific time. It's important. We make up the population of this class because this is period C. We're together with a population of period C, right? Yesterday we talked about habitats. We talked about the importance of abiotic and biotic factors in a habitat. Moving to the center of the room. Keep in mind that living things are an important component to all living things. Other organisms, I should say. We're going to kind of pick up more on that as we go along, but they play a role in survival, okay? If a population's needs are not met in their direct environment, what can happen? They can die, it's true. What else can happen?
They can fight.
They can compete for resources for sure. What else can happen? They can leave and say, I'm out of here. I'm going to look for resources somewhere else. Or if there's diversity in the ecosystem, what can happen? Adaptations. Good. Up this one. Yeah. So symbiosis. Anybody know what that means? Dependent.
Different species depending on each other.
It's not always dependent, but it can be. Working together, have sometimes a mutual respect for each other. They could live closely together. There's a lot of ways to define symbiosis, but two real important ways is the fact that it's organisms that live closely together in some capacity that may depend on each other or may not. That's or is a big part of it, okay? But they do live closely together in some capacity. And the reason I had you flip slides is because this relationship is a symbiotic relationship. What is this relationship? Predator-prey. We call it predation. What does my predator do? Hunts, eats, it's killed. That's good. It actively hunts another organism, and the prey is the one that gets hunted. Correct. So if I'm going to use this diagram and say describe predation using this diagram, how do you do that?
The zebra is the prey, the lion is the
The
prey.
lion hunts and kills.
The lion actively hunts and kills the zebra, which is its prey. Okay? If I was to say, use this diagram to express to me an important role of an organism in the ecosystem.
The zebra provides food for the lion.
The zebra provides food for the lion. What else? Important role. What's an important role by definition?
Like a niche.
What it could be. I gave you a definition yesterday, a vocabulary word that describes an important role in the ecosystem.
A key.
Keynote.
Keystone.
I mean-
Keystone.
Yeah, I said keynote. Keystone predator. Good. So we know the predator.